Imagine that this man caused a $45 billion collapse. Millions of lives were ruined, entire companies disappeared, and the entire crypto market was affected.
So we are a little bit disappointed in the way that prosecutors are attempting to, create new regulation through criminal enforcement proceedings.
But what makes this even crazier? The man behind it wasn't some anonymous hacker or criminal mastermind. He was a Stanford graduate who had worked at Apple and Microsoft, and before he became one of the most infamous men in crypto, he was just a young entrepreneur trying to build something of his own. This is the story of Do Kwon, and to understand how he built a $45 billion illusion, we have to go back to where it all started. Do Kwon is a South Korean, came to the US at 19 to study computer science at Stanford, graduating in 2015. He had a bigger vision than working for big corporations. His first entrepreneurial attempt was AnyFi, founded in 2016, which tried to create a decentralized Wi-Fi network. But the project failed, not because of one dramatic mistake. It just struggled because the business model and technology were hard to scale. Around 2017, back in Seoul with no startup left, Kwon starts studying crypto's biggest flaw, volatility, and finds a project called Basis, an algorithmic stablecoin promising a steady $1 peg with zero cash reserves. To Kwon, this was the missing piece, a digital dollar that stabilized itself. He was hooked. In January 2018, Do Kwon co-founds Terraform Labs with entrepreneur Daniel Shin. Their pitch, a stablecoin called Terra USD, designed to always be worth exactly $1, what's called a peg. Think of it like a promise. No matter what happens in the wild, volatile world of crypto, one Terra USD could always be traded for $1 real worth of value. But a promise like that is worthless without trust. Most stablecoins earn that trust by holding real dollars or treasury bonds in a vault somewhere, so anyone can check the reserves are actually there. Kwon wanted to skip the vault entirely. His stablecoin would hold its value through code alone, an algorithm balancing supply and demand in real time. To pull that off, Kwon needed two things: attract investors and leverage that money into marketing to get users. He got both almost immediately, winning investor trust in his vision and pointing to 15 e-commerce companies across Asia already operating on the Terra blockchain as proof that this wasn't just a white paper idea. It was already being built into products people used.
So we launched our payment gateway called Chai about 13 weeks ago, and I'm a little bit biased here, but we've been getting some phenomenal progress.
That early credibility is what let Terra start pulling in serious money. 2 years later, in late 2020, while still running Terraform Labs, Kwon quietly builds another stablecoin, Basis Cash, but this time not under his own name. He manages it in secret, hiding behind a pseudonym, Rick Sanchez. Basis Cash fails almost immediately. Just like Terra, it had no real dollars or reserves behind it, only an algorithm promising to hold the peg through supply and demand alone. The moment people lost confidence and started selling, there was nothing solid underneath to stop the price from falling. The peg broke, and it never recovered. Kwon had just watched his own experiment prove that an algorithmic stablecoin, with nothing but code behind it, could collapse the second trust disappeared. He built Terra the exact same way anyway, and never told his investors he'd already run this experiment once and lost. Terra ran on two tokens. UST was meant to always equal $1. Luna absorbed the risk to keep it there. If UST dropped, people could trade it for a dollar's worth of Luna, shrinking UST's supply and pushing the price back up. But it only works if people still want Luna. If confidence breaks and everyone sells UST at once, the algorithm prints more Luna to buy it back, crashing Luna's price, which breaks confidence even further. Look, you don't need to fully understand the mechanics here. All you really need to know is this: UST was meant to always be $1, and Luna's whole job was to keep it there. Kwon needed more proof to attract more investors. So he pointed to an app called Chai, a popular Korean payment app co-founded by his partner, Daniel Shin. Millions of transactions, he claimed, were running through the Terra blockchain every single month. Real proof that Terra wasn't just speculation, it was infrastructure already being used in the real economy. It was a lie. Chai never actually ran on Terra. Payments were processed, the normal way, through traditional banking systems. Kwon simply had fake transaction data written onto the blockchain in parallel, mimicking real activity that never actually happened. Investors were convinced. Now Kwon needed users, millions of them, fast. He promised a fixed 20% annual return. Just deposit UST and watch your money grow. In a world where banks paid less than 1%, it was irresistible. Money poured in from everyday people looking for a better place to keep their savings. But that 20% wasn't coming from the market. There was no lending demand big enough to actually generate it. It was subsidized. Terraform Labs was paying the difference out of its own reserves, burning through millions of dollars every single day just to keep the promise alive. It was Kwon spending his own money to make Terra look successful and pull in more users. In June 2021, Kwon watched a famous cryptocurrency collapse in real time. Iron Finance's token, Titan, went from $64 to $0 in a single day. Even famous investors like Mark Cuban lose money in the crash. Speculation starts running online because Titan shared the same core flaw as Terra.
95% are gonna die.
Yeah.
95% are going to die. Yeah. Yeah, there's also entertainment in watching companies die too.
There's entertainment. Oh man, that's so evil.
And that's where the first real challenge to Kwon begins. A trader publicly bets $1 million that Terra collapses the same way. Kwon takes the bet. Another trader raises the stakes to $10 million. Kwon takes that one too. When a British economist warns that Terra's system could fail under the exact same pressure that just killed Titan, Kwon doesn't engage with the argument. He simply tweets. I don't debate the poor. It becomes his catchphrase. His followers, who'd started calling themselves lunatics, turn it into a badge of honor. To them, every critic wasn't raising a warning. They were just jealous or too poor to understand what Kwon was building. The more people warned him, the more untouchable he seemed to become. In May 2021, Terra briefly loses its peg, dropping to 90 cents. The algorithm is supposed to handle this automatically and restore the peg to $1. No human help needed. That's the entire selling point. But Kwon doesn't rely on it. He secretly contacts Jump Trading, one of the largest trading firms in the world, and strikes a deal. Jump buys up over $62 million worth of UST, pushing the price back to $1. In exchange, Kwon quietly hands them the right to buy 61 million Luna tokens at just 40 cents each, tokens that would later trade above $90. Jump would go on to make over $1 billion off that deal. Then Kwon goes public. He claims the peg recovered on its own. Proof, he says, that the algorithm works, that Terra can survive anything the market throws at it. No mention of Jump, no mention of the deal. It was a lie. And for the next year, that recovery becomes his biggest marketing weapon. The proof that convinces investors, users, and even skeptics that Terra is different. That it was the one algorithmic stablecoin that actually worked. In April 2022, Kwon named his daughter Luna after what he called his greatest invention. Just days before the collapse, Kwon quietly files to dissolve Terraform Labs' South Korean entity. The filing goes in on April 30th, 2022. It's approved on May 4th. 3 days later, the collapse begins. Whether it was a coincidence or Kwon protecting himself before the storm hit, the timing speaks for itself. May 7th, 2022. 9:44 p.m. Terraform Labs pulls $150 million out of Curve, the main exchange pool keeping UST's price stable. Nobody outside the company knows why yet, but it just made the whole system easier to push over. 13 minutes later, an anonymous wallet, later named Wallet A, dumps $85 million of UST into that now weakened pool. Then it keeps going. Another $200 million pulled from Anchor. $108 million dumped on Binance. Within the hour, other traders pile on with another $100 million. UST slips to 99.5 cents. A half cent might sound like nothing. For a stablecoin, it's a siren. The Luna Foundation Guard, the fund built specifically to defend the peg, steps in. They deploy $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, buying up UST to push it back to $1. For a few hours, it actually works. UST climbs back to 99 cents. People exhale. But on Anchor, the exits don't stop. May 9th alone, $5 billion. Over a third of everything deposited gets pulled out. Everyone chasing that 20% is now chasing the exit instead. The peg breaks for good. 69 cents. Then 35. Kwon tweets, deploying more capital. Steady, lads. It becomes the most infamous tweet in crypto history because the algorithm is now doing exactly what it was built to do. And that's the problem. Every dollar of UST sold gets converted into freshly printed Luna. On May 7th, there were 350 million Luna in circulation. By May 12th, there are 6.5 trillion. The supply explodes over 20,000 times in 5 days. Luna's price doesn't crash. It evaporates. $80 on May 7th, under $1 by the 11th, fractions of a cent by the 12th. That same day, Terraform Labs halts the blockchain entirely. No transactions, no trades. The network just stops. When it comes back online, hours later, Luna is worthless. 7 days, $45 billion gone. Those $45 billion are not just numbers or statistics. They are years of work and investment for people. May 12th, 2022. The day the blockchain halts, an investor claiming to have lost $2.3 million breaks into Kwon's apartment building in Seoul, demanding accountability. Kwon's wife files for emergency police protection. Within days, Kwon is gone. He leaves the country. By September, South Korea issues an arrest warrant. Interpol puts out a red notice. His passport gets revoked.
Do Kwon and 5 other members of the leadership team at Terra have been issued arrest warrants by South Korea.
A journalist asks him about it in an interview that October.
In the next several days, it looks like your South Korean passport will be invalidated. What do you plan to do at that point?
I'm not using it anyway, so I can't see how that makes a difference to me.
Meaning you don't intend to travel from where you are now?
No, that's not what I meant.
Do you have another passport that you can use to travel?
I just don't feel comfortable talking about, location or how I plan to travel, and things like that.
By December, authorities track him to Serbia. He keeps moving. Then, March 23rd, 2023, Kwon gets arrested at an airport in Montenegro, carrying forged Costa Rican and Belgian passports. Not even good forgeries. His own lawyer later describes finding him shivering in a cold Montenegrin jail cell. Kwon would later write to the judge about what that prison was actually like, bribing guards with cigarettes just to get soap, food that was basically gruel, 10 people crammed into 8 square meters, rats crawling over his legs while he slept. He spends almost 2 years in that cell while the US and South Korea fight over who gets him first. On New Year's Eve, 2024, Kwon finally boards a plane. Destination, New York. But the real reckoning came later. In the United States, prosecutors accused Kwon of something much bigger than simply building a failed cryptocurrency. They said he had deliberately lied to investors about how Terra actually worked. And one detail was particularly damaging. Back in 2021, UST briefly lost its $1 peg. Kwon told the world that the algorithm had worked, that the system had automatically restored UST to $1. But according to prosecutors and evidence presented at trial, that wasn't what happened. Terraform had secretly relied on jump trading, a major trading firm, to buy huge amounts of UST and help push its price back toward the dollar. The problem wasn't just that someone had helped. It was that investors were led to believe they were watching the system work by itself. And Kwon used that apparent recovery as proof that Terra's system was reliable. Then there was Chai. Kwon had presented Terra's partnership with the Korean payment app as evidence that millions of real-world transactions were running on Terra's blockchain. But the SEC argued that this wasn't true either. The jury ultimately found Kwon and Terraform liable for fraud, with the collapse wiping out roughly $40 billion in market value. And then, in August 2025, Kwon finally pleaded guilty to fraud charges. 4 months later, the sentence came down. 15 years in prison. But perhaps the most powerful part of the hearing wasn't Kwon. It was the people sitting across from him. The court received 315 victim impact letters. People described losing their savings, their homes, their businesses, their futures. One victim told the court that members of his own family had invested their retirement savings into Terra. Another woman described losing almost everything she had invested. And some victims said the collapse had pushed them to the edge of suicide. Then came one of the strangest moments of the entire case. Even after everything had happened, some people were still defending Kwon, still calling him a visionary, still believing in the man who had destroyed the investment they once believed in. Judge Paul Engelmayer looked at those letters and said they read like they came from a fan club. He compared some of Kwon's supporters to cult followers whose Kool-Aid hadn't worn off. And for the judge, the central issue wasn't that Terra had failed. It was that the failure had been hidden behind an illusion. But Terra didn't die alone. When Luna went to almost zero, the damage spread far beyond the people who owned UST. Terra 2.0 was launched shortly afterward. The idea was simple. Take another shot. Create a new Luna. Start again. But this time, without the mechanism that had destroyed the original system. The problem was that you can't simply reboot trust. The old ecosystem had already destroyed it. And the damage was spreading. 3 Arrows Capital, one of the biggest crypto hedge funds, collapsed. Then came Voyager, Celsius, BlockFi, Genesis, and eventually FTX. Terra had helped trigger a chain reaction through a crypto market that was already extremely leveraged and fragile. What had started as one stablecoin losing its peg had turned into something much bigger. A full-blown crypto winter. Companies collapsed. Billions disappeared. And an entire generation of crypto investors learned the same lesson at the same time. When everyone believes an asset is safe, that belief can become part of the asset itself. But once that belief disappears, there may be nothing underneath it. And that's what makes the Terra story so disturbing, because almost everything that made Terra look trustworthy had a story behind it. The peg looked stable. But when it broke in 2021, the recovery wasn't what investors were told it was. The Chai partnership looked like proof of real-world adoption. But prosecutors said the transactions weren't actually being processed on Terra the way Kwon represented them. The 20% yield made UST look like a safe way to earn passive income. But that yield itself required enormous amounts of money to keep flowing through the system. And when the money stopped, the illusion stopped with it. For years, Terra looked like a machine that had figured out how to create stability. But stability wasn't being created. It was being maintained. And there is a huge difference. Because the system didn't need everyone to understand how it worked. It only needed them to believe it worked. That belief attracted more money. More money made the system look stronger. The stronger it looked, the more people trusted it. And the more people trusted it, the bigger it became. Until one day, the belief disappeared. And when it did, $45 billion in value vanished in a matter of days. Do Kwon didn't just build a cryptocurrency. He built something far more powerful. An illusion of stability. An illusion of decentralization. And for a while, the illusion was worth $45 billion. But when the illusion finally disappeared, there was nothing underneath it.
It's a cycle of life. You begin from nothing and go back to nothing. And that's exactly where I want to be. So I think Terra is going to be the decentralized money standard across the entire blockchain, across all the blockchains. And I'm excited for Terraform Labs to contribute a significant portion of that early vision. but eventually to go back to nothing.
Right.
Yeah. Excited.